Hello, what is knowledge? In this brief video, we're going to talk about knowledge as a mental state, and that is probably the first thing to recognize. Knowledge is a mental state or a cognitive state, but it's a particular kind of cognitive or mental state known as an intentional state. And an intentional state is contrasted with a sensation. So a sensation might be a pain, a tickle, an itch, things like that derive their identity from the sensation itself, from the mental content itself. Intentional states, on the other hand, are directed at something other or external to themselves. And so examples of intentional states are believing, hoping, wishing, intending, trying, wishing, and of course, knowing itself. The list, by the way, goes on, and Descartes has a list in the Meditations that you can see as well. So now, when we talk about knowledge, we're not talking right now about the kind of knowledge that we make reference to when we say things like, oh, I know him, right? That's a kind of knowledge by acquaintance, like knowing a person or a friend or a family member. Likewise, we're not talking about knowing how. So I know how to tie my shoes, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about this rather special way in which we make knowledge claims, and sometimes it's referred to as propositional knowledge. It's knowing that. And when you think about it, when people make these kinds of knowledge claims, they tend to be conversation enders. They're announcements to the effect of, you don't need to explain that to me because I already know that. So simple examples would include, I know that 2 + 2 = 4. I know that the volume of the Earth is greater than the volume of Earth's moon, and similar kinds of claims. So notice that claiming to know something is stronger and more definitive and has an air of authority that is similar to the way in which we sometimes invoke science or logic or mathematics. We say things like, science has proved, or that's mathematically certain, or oh, now I've forgotten the third one. If you were only logical, you would believe what I believe, right? And so it is also with knowledge. Oh, I know that, right? Is a way of sort of deflating any invitation to conversation. So the question becomes, well, how is knowledge so authoritative in its nature that it tends to silence opposition, or at least it announces on the part of the speaker a claim to something that's greater, that's more secure than a mere belief or an opinion, right? So somebody might say, well, I'm of the opinion that, and that sort of leaves open some kind of a little gap that we don't sense when somebody says that they know something. We may go on to ask them how it is that they do know what they claim to know. And we also know that sometimes people make knowledge claims when in fact they don't know what they claim to know. In fact, we're all at one point or another guilty of claiming to know something that later on we find out sure enough is wrong, and then we retract our knowledge claims. So when I was 4 years old, I knew that Santa was coming on Christmas Eve, and of course I had to retract that eventually. So René Descartes is interested in the foundations of knowledge, and he thinks that he has a method whereby, if we follow it, we can see for ourselves that knowledge is not only possible, but to a certain extent, it is within us as rational beings. And so what we have to do is follow his method, and then we can see for ourselves that we are in possession of knowledge. Now, that was actually quite a philosophical move, because it claimed authority for the individual reasoner, something we almost universally take for granted today, but which was radical and even dangerous at the time Descartes lived. And so it is that he is very often thought of or referred to as the father of modern philosophy. Now, if we take his method seriously, the first thing he says that we need to do, if we want our knowledge claims to have a firm foundation, is we have to doubt everything that we can possibly doubt. If we can find a way to doubt it, we must doubt it. However, it's easy to think that Descartes himself must have been skeptical. And in reality, not just when he was doing philosophy, but in his actual life, he was a faithful Catholic Christian man from the time of his youth until the time that he died. And so he's only suggesting that we do this methodologically so that we can put our knowledge on a firm foundation. So keep that in mind as we move forward into a study of Descartes.